Welcome to this meeting of the Cabinet Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of September 2021. Just to make you all aware, today's meeting will be recorded. Can I also welcome any members of the public and press to today's meeting? Can I kindly ask you to observe the meeting only and not speak or participate? Can I please remind you also to switch your microphone to silent for the duration of the meeting? In addition, can I refer you to the protocols for remote meetings which have been previously circulated? Namely, your microphone should be switched to mute unless you are speaking. Should you wish to ask a question or make a comment, can you please indicate either by the chat function or by raising your electronic hand via Teams? I will assume that you have all read the paperwork before us today prior to the meeting. Please only use the chat function to indicate if you wish to speak as an alternative to the electronic hand function or to raise any technical issues. When asking a question, can you please indicate which page number you are referring to? Okay, the first item on our agenda today is to do a roll call. I am Councillor Saifur Rahman, the chair, and I'm present. I will now call on Chloe, the Democratic Service Officer, to take the roll call, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've marked you as present. Councillor Sharon Freegard.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Wyndham Griffiths.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Nigel Hunt.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Steve Hunt.
I am here, Chloe, thank you.
Councillor Dennis Keogh.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Simon Noyle. Councillor Simon Noyle. Councillor Alan Llewellyn.
Present, Chloe, I'm here.
Councillor Sandra Miller.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Rydian Maisen.
Present now, Chloe.
Councillor Suzanne Patterson.
Present.
Councillor Lynette Patel.
Present.
Councillor Sheila Penry.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Sonia Reynolds.
Present, Chloe.
Had apologies from Councillor Rachel Taylor. Councillor Arwen Wilcock.
Is present, Chair.
And Cabinet members, Councillor Edward Latham.
Yeah, present, Chloe.
Councillor Leanne Jones.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Carol Clement Williams.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Mike Harvey.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Doreen Jones.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Alan Lockyer.
Present, Chloe.
Councillor Peter Rees.
Present, Zoe.
Councillor Peter Richards.
Present, Chloe.
And Councillor Annette Wingrave.
Present, Chloe.
And officers, Karen Jones.
Present.
Howell Jenkins.
Present.
Andrew Thomas.
Present, Chloe.
Present.
Nicola Pierce.
Present.
Craig Griffiths.
Present.
Hugh Jones. Claire Jones.
Present.
Paul Hinder. Sana San.
Present.
Chloe. Sorry, Chloe. Paul Hinder's available just to be called into the meeting should he be needed.
Okay, thank you. And Paul Ransom.
He's not present.
Okay, thank you. And Jane Woodman-Ralph.
Present, Chloe.
Have I missed anyone participating in today's meeting? No, I think that's everyone, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. Item 2 on the Cabinet Scrutiny agenda is Chair's announcement. We have chosen to scrutinize item 7 on the Cabinet agenda. We also have one urgent item at today's meeting, which we have also chosen to scrutinize. Item number 2, agenda item number 2, declaration of interest. Can members please indicate whether they have any declaration in relation to the items that we have chosen to scrutinize today? Okay, I see none. Item number 4 then, pre-decision scrutiny. We will now move to the Cabinet papers for pre-decision scrutiny. Okay, the first item is the management of risk and liabilities of disused mine and quarry tips within the authority and the future management of coal tips safety. Mr. David Griffiths is the reporting officer, but we also have Nicola Pierce, Hassan, and Paul Ransom, who are in attendance to answer any question. This item is for decision. I would just like to highlight one thing, is that this report is public. However, Appendix 1 of this report is private. Therefore, if members have any questions on Appendix 1, we will need to move into private. We will first deal with the main report, and then if there are questions or if the answers from officers relate to Appendix 1, which is a private report, then we will move into private then. Please note, we will need to move back into public to deal with the recommendations. Can I ask, officers, do you have anything further to add, or shall I go straight to questions?
Chair, we have nothing further to add over and above the report. We appreciate that some questions have already been forwarded to officers, so I don't know if you want the specific members to ask those questions or whether you want us to go straight to the answers in relation to those questions that we've already received.
I think for benefit of everyone today, I think what I will do is ask those members who already submitted the questions if they could ask them today, if that's okay, Nicola.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, can I ask Councillor Arwin Wilcock first, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll start with a comment, and I did submit this in advance of the meeting so that officers could have an opportunity to look at them. I'll start with a comment then, Chair, and I'll read it exactly as I submitted it. I note that the responsibility of maintenance lies with the landowner, which I consider grossly unfair. Wealth has been taken from these areas, and by that I mean coal, over the decades, yet landowners, private or public, are now required to pick up the tab for maintaining these spoils. The Coal Authority was set up on the privatization of the coal industry to manage these sites. Yet local authorities and private individuals are now presented with the responsibility to maintain these areas. This is not just unreasonable and unjust, but in my opinion, Chair, it is morally repugnant. And I would respectfully ask, Chair, that if we could consider, or if Cabinet, as a follow-up to this Scrutiny Committee this afternoon, could consider referring that to the Law Commission as part of the recommendation 35 set out in today's report. Moving on to my question then, the report does refer to spoil tips that were deposited from deep mines. What proposals are there to monitor spoil tips as a result of open cast mining? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Arwin. Nicola, are you taking this?
Yes, Chair. I concur with Councillor Wilcock's comments in relation to the issue of the moral responsibility for monitoring and maintaining the spoil tips being with the landowner. And we have raised concerns about that with Welsh Government, and we understand the Welsh Government are lobbying central government with a view to securing funding so that funding can be passed on to the owners of those tips so that they can be monitored and maintained appropriately going forward. So that issue is already being followed up by officers within this authority as well as officers within Welsh Government. But as I say, we agree with Councillor Wilcock's position as well. In terms of open cast mining, members will be aware that we've had a large number of big major open cast mines within the county borough, some of which are still undergoing restoration. Now, as part of that restoration scheme, detailed plans are submitted to the local planning authority for consideration, and the design of any tips which remain on those sites, so they would be in the form of surcharge mounds and overburden mounds, they are designed to be stable and we send copies of those plans and any maintenance regimes associated with the restored landscape to both NRW, who are responsible for any water courses and drainage within those areas, as well as to the Coal Authority, so that the specialist officers within those organisations can establish whether or not those surcharge and overburden mounds will be safe for future generations. But ultimately, the responsibility for managing and monitoring those surcharge and overburden mounds going forward also rests with the landowner. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Arwen, do you wish to come back?
Yeah, with your indulgence, yes, Chair. I'm grateful to Mrs. Pearce for responding. That's fine. However, I note that that representations have been made to Welsh Government. But bearing in mind that condition 35 in today's report does say that, and I'll read it out, that due to the timescales involved in preparing NPT's response to the Law Commission's consultation, that delegated powers be granted to the Director of Environment and Regeneration to prepare and submit the response to the Law Commission consultation exercise in consultation with a cabinet member for street scene and engineering. I see no reason, Chair, if cabinet consider this item later on, that we can't report back to the Law Commission as well. And I accept the explanation with regard to the overburden tips. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Arwen. Next, Alan Llewellyn, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. The long list of sites in the report, notes there are 404 of these sites of concern within Neath or Talbot, demonstrates the legacy of mine and quarries in our own county, and of course that's replicated in local authorities all across the South Wales coalfield and also in the North Wales slate quarrying areas. And I know from experience of landslides and floods in my own area of Ystafell and Panteg and Goregraig how destructive that legacy can be. And over the past year, we have seen the devastating effects of mine water in Skewen. Now, these valleys were the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution, but the profit of those industries were not retained here or reinvested here. And the costs we still face to keep our areas safe are horrendous. So while I welcome the proposed inspections and specific actions in our funding bid to Welsh Government, I fear that this is scratching the surface. And I have two specific questions on today's report. First of all, if it's possible just to have confirmation, my understanding, that even if sites don't appear in the bid being submitted currently to Welsh Government, any Category C or Category D tips will still be inspected so that any risks can be identified and therefore mitigated. And the second question, on page 57, there's reference within the bid being submitted to Welsh Government to Kilmine Gwyn. Can I just clarify if that is the same area of Kilmine Gwyn that includes the area behind Goregraig Primary School, where it's previously been identified that further surveys to consider the possibility of mitigating work have already been agreed, or is this referring to something else in Kilmine Gwyn? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Alan. Nicola, over to you, but can I just remind you that if you need to tap into the appendix 1 of the report, then could you indicate we will have to go into private?
Okay, thank you, Chair. In terms of the inspections to the tips, we have put a bid forward. details of which are in the appendix, which I won't go into in this meeting unless we go into private session. But we are undertaking at present inspections of all category C and D tips within Neath Talbot, and that work is already being taking place and is being undertaken in conjunction with the Coal Authority. So I can sort of reassure you that that is taking place. It is obviously reliant upon future funding coming forward from Welsh Government. We have been successful to date in securing funding for the bids that we've put forward already, and we've put future bids forward to the Welsh Government for future inspection and associated mitigation work. And Welsh Government are, as I mentioned earlier on, lobbying UK government because of that legacy issue that Councillor Woolcock mentioned, and Councillor Llewellyn, you also mentioned that that lobbying is taking place to ensure that the legacy that's been left behind following the winning and working of coal is taken care of. In terms of tips within the ownership of NRW and the Coal Authority, of which there are also a number, they are also being inspected by the Coal Authority. So that work is already in hand. In terms of your question in relation to Kilmangwyn, yes, it is the same location that you were referring to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Alan, anything you want to come back on? You're on mute, Alan.
Yeah, sorry, no, that's fine, Chair. Thanks for that reply. Thank you.
Okay, Nicola, you mentioned lobbying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Councillor Susan Paddington to come in because one of her questions was in relation to lobbying. Susan, do you want to go next?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. I think Councillor Woolcock summed it up quite nicely, actually, in saying that no problem in giving the Director of the Environment the delegated authority to reply. However, I do agree with him that we should, or that possibly the Cabinet should, write separately to the Law Commission, expressing the members' views most vehemently that we do not believe that it should be left to the landowners. Now, I'm not sure if the rest of the committee agree with me or if indeed that could be done, but I do suggest, I do concur with Councillor Woolcock that, you know, in my mind, that is what should happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Next, I have Councillor Lynette Patel, please.
Thank you very much. I totally agree with everything that's been said about who should be picking up the tab for this. But when I was scrutinising these papers, there was just one figure that jumped out at me that caused me concern. And it could be that I've got nothing to worry about, but I picked it up on page 39 when it says that 7% of tips remain unregistered. And when you then go forward to page 40, it says any new legislation is likely to require improved monitoring of tips and spell out the responsibilities of the owner and the local authority with more prescriptive duties. So being obviously very concerned about the devil is in the detail, I just wondered what happens with these 7% that are registered. By unregistered, does it mean that nobody knows who owns them? And in which case, who is responsible for them? I don't know whether anybody can answer that for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the 7% of unregistered tips, there is no known landowner, which is a serious concern for the authority. So it's not new. It's not something which is uncommon, unfortunately. We frequently come up against issues in relation to land, and when we do a land registry search to identify who the owner is and therefore who is responsible, it frequently is apparent that the land is unregistered, and therefore you cannot chase a landowner to take responsibility for making good whatever the issue is on that land. Now, as part of our response to the Coal Authority, to the Law Commission, sorry, we will be identifying that as a major concern for us. And if that responsibility then falls onto the local authority, we would be identifying that there will be obviously a cost associated with that responsibility, which we cannot at present afford. So we will be making that quite clear within our consultation response to the Law Commission.
Lynette,
Can I
you want to come back?
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I'm just trying to get this clear. So we've got a piece of land and we don't know who owns it, and there could be something quite dangerous on that piece of land. And what we're saying, what I understand from what Nicola is saying, is we would then have to go onto that land and deal with it. How are we covered as far as liability, insurance, health and safety and everything else if we're going on to some land that doesn't belong to us to try and sort something out? I know it's the devil in the detail, but I'm just anticipating potential nightmares. Thank you.
I probably haven't explained myself properly, and I apologise for that. But if it's unregistered land, then the local authority does not have the responsibility or the duty to step in. However, we may well want to step in because of the wider consequences to our communities if indeed our communities are affected. So what we will be pointing out to the Law Commission is that this issue regarding unregistered land needs to be rectified, and a responsibility going forward needs to be identified. Now, we are of the opinion that it shouldn't rest with the local authorities because we do not have the financial ability nor the staff resources to deal with significant areas of land which need monitoring and mitigation, which are not within our ownership. We do not have the specialist officers at scale required to deal with this either. So what we will be suggesting as part of the Law Commission is that it may well be appropriate for either Welsh Government or indeed the Coal Authority to step in these circumstances, because they have all of the skills and knowledge associated with the mineral legacy that has been left behind in Neath, Talbot and other coalfield areas.
Okay, Lynette. Problem. Thank you. Councillor Steve Hunt next, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I certainly support that the other members' comments and Arwin. I support his recommendation today. But can I just ask a couple of questions, and I'll read it as I sent it to Nicola and others, so that there's no confusion, because some of the questions possibly are to take us into private, but Nicola can deal with that as and when. I want to make reference to page 43, leading on to page 44. The report states that the privately owned tips or spoils are at this stage not forming part of an inspection, and these costs may be borne by Neath Talbot Council or Welsh Government or UK governments, but we will know more after the publication of the new draft legislation in 2022. If this is correct, can I ask where all our privately owned coal spoils or tips are in Neath Talbot Council? And if given the obvious changing climate that will, by all the experts, suggest that we can expect much wetter seasons, then this might pose significant threat to livelihood or community potential costs through flooding or other potential damage. Would Neath Talbot have to deal with it? And when this happens, I don't believe that the council would have the finances for major disruption that these incidents would or could cause in the future. For example, it's been alluded to, and some of the questions I've got have been answered, but over in Skewen, we had the extensive problem there, and there's ongoing problems that have arisen from this terrible event, where legal challenges for residents is ongoing. So if there is one thing we can learn from this situation, then this is to find a way to strengthen financial support with the UK, Welsh Government and the Coal Authority to be able to do the right thing for all those in any community affected. Can I go further in our ongoing discussions? Sorry, can we go further in our ongoing discussions with the UK, Welsh Governments, and dare I say the Coal Authority, so to put in place financial support for any eventuality of a similar occurrence or even less of a problem to support any residents or other residents impacted by such a situation in the future? Felling of trees and other circumstances are sort of making any water problems exacerbated, and certainly mines that we're unaware of, underground water, we all remember the Gleichen situation, and I appreciate that it didn't actually cause flooding, but there's an awful lot of water under the ground in disused mines. And Nicola would be aware that I have a mine in Severn that the coal authority that we've been asking to fill in for a number of years still haven't achieved that. So it's a certain circumstances that I wouldn't like to find myself in the village that I represent. And finally, I also noticed on page 43 that Welsh Government have agreed to cover the inspection costs of the privately owned high-risk tips of C and D, which is excellent news, of course. But what about the medium and low-risk tips that potentially could still cause problems for our communities? What are our proposals for them? Are we covering every eventuality? And have we got the information for these coal spoils or tips or mines, small private mines, available to us so we know what we're dealing with? Thank you for that, Chair, and I look forward to Nicola's response. Thank you.
Nicola, over to you then, please.
Yeah, there's quite a long question, and unfortunately we didn't have all of it in advance, so I don't know whether I only got part of the question sent to me in advance, so I'll try and do my best. It's fair to say that the spoil tips are located all over the county borough, so I wouldn't be able to say that there are 7 here and there are 8 there. We have got them mapped, and we're in the process of continually updating our mapping system so that we capture the position of each of the tips, and we are linking any inspection records and risk assessments associated to each of those tips so that we've got a full suite of information available to us. As you'll see from page 39, well, from 38 to 39 of the report, 38 and 39 of the report. Originally, when we started mapping out our tips, and that was before the issue which took place in Rhondda and Taff, we felt it important some time ago to have a better understanding of the tips within the county borough and what risk they posed to our community. So we started doing this before the landslide which occurred over in RCT. And at that particular time, we had 172 tips catalogued within NPT. When that incident took place in RCT and the task force was set up and the coal authority moved in to support local authorities, and they scrutinised records far more in depth than we were able to at the time, and also undertook LiDAR and aerial photography, it was established that there were 404 tips in NPT. So you can appreciate there are a large number of tips which are spread out throughout the county borough. So I'm not able to identify where each of them are for you, but I'm sure we could make that information available to you should you want to see detail out of this meeting. In terms of the different tips and the categories, as the report indicates, there are categories A, B, C and D, and categories C and D are of most concern to us, and they have more frequent requirements for monitoring and inspection. So those are the tips that we are inspecting because of the increased risks associated with them. Now, in terms of tips within category A, they are of least concern to us because they are considered to be stable or they are remote from properties which could be affected by any movement. So they are, effectively not a risk to us. In terms of the tips within Group B, there's evidence to suggest that there's been no history of movement. However, if movement did occur, they may impact upon a watercourse, which could in turn impact upon properties. So there is a slight risk associated with those. But it's the category C and category D tips that we are of most concern. And as a consequence, that's why we are focusing our attention, and the Coal Authority are also focusing their attention on inspecting those as a priority. And the report indicates what sort of inspection regime we've got in place. So Group C tips are inspected every 6 months, and Group D tips are inspected every 6 to 8 weeks. And if there is a period of heavy rainfall, we will increase the frequency of those visits so that we have better understanding of the risks that those tips have upon the communities within the surrounding area. So I think that in addition to the sort of answers I provided to previous members, I think that pretty much covers it, but I'm happy to be reminded if there is anything that I haven't covered, Councillor Hunt.
Steve?
Yes, through you, Chair. Yeah, thank you, Nicola, and apologies to you anyway, because you're right, I added a few more observations in my questions to you. So you're quite right. You didn't have those in advance, but you had the questions in advance. Yeah, my concerns really is obviously, and I know it overlaps really. There's calls, spoils and tips. And I know certainly in the Valley communities, the Dillais Valley, for instance, I'm well aware of my background working from these particular small mines and private mines. There's hundreds of them, and they are situated up on the mountainside where the communities are below them. And I was making reference to tree felling, where we well aware that obviously they happen and for the right reasons, but they do impact on the water courses and any potential slides where build-up of water. And that's what I was concerned about, is where these mines are located. And if it happens, because, and I'm not referring to landslides as Alan mentioned and coal spoils coming down, but water itself, as we know, in Skewin and other areas, caused extremely huge problems and damage to communities, and the points I raised. So that's where I was asking, and the one bit that perhaps you're not able to answer, maybe somebody else can, Craig or somebody, but can we lobby in a position, or are we in a position to try and put a financial package together to support the eventualities that have happened in Skewin? Because we all know the issues that they concern there. I'm sorry I'm asking questions where you say low risks are not at this moment in time, but given climate change, which was part of the question, they could become a serious concern. And I think it's always best to talk about it now rather than when it happens. But I think you understand what I was saying. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Nicola, over to you.
Yeah, in terms of tree felling, we are mindful that NRW, through their forestry arm, are major landowners throughout Neath Talbot, where they've got significant areas of tree coverage, which they are growing for sale. And obviously they have harvesting plans in place to grow those trees, harvest them, allow the ground to recover, and then they replant. So it's on a rolling programme. They are also mindful that there are a large number of former collieries, so deep mine and drift mines on their sites, as well as the coal tips associated with that mineral legacy. And they are also working with the Coal Authority to ensure that the tips on their land are inspected and that they've got mitigation measures in place to ensure that those tips are stable or are managed going forward. So they will have to be mindful of any work that they undertake within the immediate vicinity of their tips, including tree felling, which have an impact then on those tips, because they as landowner will be liable. So they will have to take that into account as a responsible landowner going forward. But as I say, they are also working with the Coal Authority to ensure that their tips are managed and monitored going forward. In relation to your second question about insurance, I am mindful that this is something that has been brought up through the Skewin emergency, and it was an awful situation to have occurred back in January, and unfortunately a large number of the residents are still dealing with the aftermath of that in terms of trying to recover and repair their properties as well as their health, which is, the emergency took a heavy toll on that too. Now, we appreciate that there is lobbying going on in central government by our national politicians, as well as our local politicians, to ensure that the UK government has cognizance of this issue and ensures that those communities are protected going forward. We are mindful that some, but not all, residents have insurance, and that insurance is there to try and protect them. But as I indicated, not all residents unfortunately have insurance for various reasons. But that issue has been brought up as a consequence of the skewing issue. But I don't think it's a matter for us as a local as a local authority to intervene in terms of us sort of providing that support to residents affected, because obviously each issue must be considered on its individual merit. But nationally, my understanding is that politicians are lobbying UK government officials and UK government, the UK government, to ensure that this issue is considered going forward, because it does have a massive impact upon the local populations.
Thank you, Nicola. Steve, you're happy with the response?
Yeah, thank you for that, Chair. Just last thing, I wasn't referring to the council taking up the bill or ensuring it was what you've given me a response to, Nicola. So I thank you for that. It was about making sure that we're aware this type of thing doesn't happen again, and it's fully covered to support those that maybe not insured, and obviously when it's not their fault whether you're insured or not, it should be those that caused the problem that should fit all bills, in my opinion. But thank you.
Okay, I have three further indication in order then: Councillor Sonia Reynolds, Councillor Nigel Hunt, and Councillor Susan Pattison. Sonia, please, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to support the comments that were made by Councillor Woolcock and the proposal there, and put forward by Suzanne Pattison for lobbying to be undertaken by the council officially, not just through officers but through the politicians, on these issues and the ownership of tips. Moving on from what's just been said about damage that water can cause, and what Councillor Woolcock said about the fact that there are tips from opencast in some of our communities, I wondered what the oversight would be, given they're having oversight of the tips themselves, of the voids left by those tips and the lakes that form filled with water that can cause seepage through mine shafts, which may themselves cause damage to land and impacts on communities, and whether or not we can also consider lobbying for some sort of support to keep a look at that.
Okay.
My understanding, Chair, is this responsibility is already rests with the call authority. So I know the particular void stroke lake that is within Councillor Reynolds' area, which is East Pit, that was designed to ensure that there was a balance of the water below ground, and it was also designed to include two outfall channels at the north and the south of the void. So when the water levels did rise, if we had periods of heavy rainfall, the water would overflow into these channels, and they would reach the nearby streams to which they were directed, and that would ensure that there was a balance of water in the area. Now, that design was implemented in relation to East Pit and Margam, where we have bodies of water in former open cast sites, and that design was approved by NRW and the Coal Authority as being appropriate and fit for purpose. But if there are any issues in terms of water emitting from any underground mine shafts or channels, which may well have originated from an open cast void, then that would be the responsibility of the coal authority to investigate and mitigate in conjunction with the landowner.
Can I just indicate, I don't know if Councillor Wilcock wanted to say anything, but I'm aware from contacts that he's reported that the Coal Authority has said they would not take responsibility for any unmarked or unrecognised coal mines, of which we have many in our area. So that is a concern to our communities.
We could potentially include the issue as an additional item for consideration by the Law Commission as part of that consultation. Normally at the end of these consultation documents, they ask whether or not we have any other issues to raise. So we can certainly raise that issue under that part of the consultation if members so wish.
That would be much appreciated.
Okay, thank you both. Councillor Nigel Hunt, please, next.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're all in concurrence, really, that since Tylerstown and since Sgwyn, there's a bit of urgency around the risks around coal tips. And I think again, we're in concurrence that we need to lobby. And in particular, I think we should be looking at Westminster here and the Minister of State, Anna-Marie Trevelyan. I just had a look on theyworkforyou.com, which is a website where you can find out what questions has been asked by MPs. And so I looked for the Member of Parliament for the constituency of Neath, Christina Rees, and I looked for the Member of Parliament for Aberafan, Stephen Kinnock, and neither of these MPs have asked any questions about this. So there's something that we can really easily improve on in terms of lobbying. We need to be speaking to our MPs and asking them to ask questions to the Ministry, to the Minister of State, and I think we can do that quite easily. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Nigel. Suzanne?
Thank you very much, Chair. This was a question that just came into my mind. I didn't mention it in pre-brief. The lists that Nicola offered to share with local members once they were established as to where they were and that, we need to be very careful about. Most of the time, I would be one of the people who would say we shouldn't keep anything from the public. But by informing the public of where these are, we're also informing the insurance companies. And I do believe that it could be an ongoing problem for ordinary residents in South Wales to get any sort of household insurance going forward if the areas where these tips are became common knowledge. And I'm not saying they probably aren't common knowledge at the moment, but I just wouldn't want anything that came from the council to exacerbate any problem that residents have in gaining insurance, because even when they do have insurance, it is difficult for them to claim. But if they are identified as living in an area prone or potentially prone to damage from these type of things, they may find it increasingly difficult to even get insurance. So can we have some sort of regard to that when we have this quite sensitive information? I'm not trying to keep it totally secret, but I'm just trying to say that we really need to be on our guard about it. Thank you.
Chair, if I respond there, I don't think it was our intention to publish this information because, as you say, not only will it be considered by any insurance company, but it also may cause upset for communities who shouldn't feel upset because we are managing this risk. You know, these tips are in 4 different categories from low to high risk. And as a consequence of that categorization, we are undertaking inspection work. So that is our way of managing those risks. But the public may not necessarily understand that through that monitoring and evaluation, we are doing that to protect them, and they may well worry unnecessarily. So I don't think that we should be reporting to the public on the, on all these risks, because I don't think it would be fair on them.
Once again, Nicola, you're ahead of me, so thank you very much.
Yeah. So, but what I perhaps in response to Councillor Steve Hunt's earlier question, if he is specifically interested in looking at the tips that are in his area, we can show him our maps, but we wouldn't want that to go out into the public realm for the reasons specified.
Great, thank you.
Arwen?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. With your indulgence, if I may, just to clarify the point that Councillor Reynolds made earlier on with regard to the Coal Authority's responsibility, I have a letter in front of me, and that's why I disappeared shortly to look for the file. Dated this is a reply that I received from the Coal Authority dated 26th of March 2021, this year. And it does state there, although we do not foresee any wider coalfield impacts beyond a short distance outside the site boundary, this is referring to East Bit East revised, we are aware of the potential for changes in the existing adit outflows at lower elevations, notably in Bryn Aman. The Coal Authority does not currently monitor at these sites, and we will seek to ensure that these are included in the site monitoring plans. So they have indicated that although they didn't currently monitor, they will in future. So I thought that was helpful to clarify, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Arwen. Steve, did you indicate you wanted to come back?
Yes, please, only of what Councillor Sir Ann Patterson said and Nicola's response. Just to clarify, yes, it was for my own knowledge of the ward. I agree that certain information, however, can I ask Craig just to also clarify from a legal perspective, because I would assume that anybody who was going to purchase a property would be legally required to have all information before purchasing a property of anything that untoward would affect their property, given the circumstances that if they weren't aware of it and they couldn't disclose it, no insurance company would pay out because they didn't disclose potential hazards at that location. So I don't think you can withhold it, and I'm not suggesting we go out of our way to give information to the general public, but it is information that is available to the general public if they ask for it. But I just want clarity on a legal aspect from Craig, if I may. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no problem, Steve. Craig?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hunter. Thank you, Chair. There would be information that could be readily available to the public via our land charges register, for example, that we hold. When individuals purchase properties, they can do what are called local land charge searches, and they can make inquiries of the local authority, which requires us to discharge certain information in line with a set of specific questions. So if there are specific questions regarding this raised, information could ultimately then be disclosed in certain circumstances as part of that transaction process.
Okay, Steve?
Yes, happy. Only for clearing it up. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, no problem. Well, there are no further indication. However, can I ask Craig to advise here? There's been a strong feeling around lobbying, and I don't quite know whether that needs to be included in the recommendation in any how, and if it can.
Okay.
Craig, would you like to clarify that, please?
Of course. What I would suggest then, Chair, listening to what members have suggested today, that looking at the existing recommendation that you have in 35 with regards to the powers to the Director of Environment Regeneration to submit the response, we add an addition at the end which says, with such a response addressing concerns on the financial responsibility of the maintenance now being passed to landowners, obviously then to reflect the various issues which have been raised here regarding Councillor Wilcox's point, and then picked up by Councillor Paterson as he moved through the debate. So that should address that issue and to make sure that it is reflected. The question mark I had is, did you want anything to go ultimately further in that regard? I did pick up one of the recommendations that you were talking about lobbying ultimately to MPs. What I was going to suggest maybe for that is maybe the copy of the intended consultation response that is submitted to the MPs, and so they can be aware of the views then of Neath Talbot Council and ask that they consider that as part of their proposals with UK government.
Excellent. Yes, I think that's absolutely perfect to be. So how do we do this now? Someone have to move the additional.
Yes, Chair, that would be great. If somebody could just, obviously, it will be the recommendations as drafted in the report, with those 2 additions, obviously, about an additional point being raised in the response and a copy of the consultation being sent to our MPs for Neath and Talbot, and Aberavon, in that sense. So if that is just proposed and seconded, we can take that recommendation then if all members are happy to support it.
I so move.
Okay, can I get a seconder, please?
I'll second that, please, Chair.
Okay, everyone in favor of those 2 items, recommendations, sorry. Okay, so what I'll do now is then I'll go to the main recommendation, which is on page 45. And as Craig stated, the 2 addition points to be included under, is it 35 you said, Craig? Recommendation 35?
Chair, that would be correct, yes.
Yes. So can I get a, can I now ask someone to propose and second for this approval to go to cabinet, please?
Move, Chair.
I'll second, Chair.
Okay. Everyone happy with that? Anyone want to abstain? No? Okay, that's fine. That's done then, that item. Okay, urgent item. We will now move on to urgent item. As I previously mentioned, we have 1 urgent item, and we have chosen to scrutinize this particular item, which is a report on the Neath Talbot County Borough Council's support of the United Kingdom's Afghan relocation and assistance policy. This is a private report, therefore we will need to move into private. Access to meeting then, to resolve to exclude the public for the following item pursuant to regulation 4(3) and (5) of statutory instrument 2001, number 2290, and the relevant exempt paragraph of part 4 of the schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972. Can I please have a proposer and a seconder to move into private, please?
Move, Chair.
Okay, thank you. If there are any public or press still in attendance, could I please ask